Hey, welcome back. Glad you're here. Grab a coffee because this one's going to take a while, and it's not the kind of story you want playing in the background while you do the dishes. There's an old boxing trope. A fighter is down on every judge's card by the sixth round. He knows it, his corner knows it, everyone watching knows it, but he keeps telling the cameras he's finding his rhythm, that the knockout is coming in the ninth. He's not lying exactly. He genuinely believes it. That's usually the moment right before he gets carried out on a stretcher. I bring this up because it is, almost beat for beat, what has been happening to American strategy in Iran since the 28th of February. And the fighter in question is not backing down from the microphone anytime soon. So, let's start where the United States started, with 4 goals, not vague ones. Specific stated public goals. Regime change in Tehran, first and foremost, because without it, nothing else on the list was realistically achievable. Second, eliminate Iran's ability to enrich uranium, since enrichment is the doorway to a bomb. Third, dismantle Iran's long-range ballistic missile program. Fourth, cut off Iranian support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. 4 goals, 1 war. And as of right now, recording this in early August, the United States has achieved exactly 0 of them. 0. Not partial progress. Not mixed results, depending how you look at it. 0. And it gets worse because the war didn't just fail to deliver the goals, it actively created new problems that did not exist on February 27th, the day before any of this started. Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz and has repeatedly shut off traffic through it, which is roughly the maritime equivalent of controlling the world's main artery and deciding, periodically, whether the world gets to breathe. American bases across the Gulf, once a serious regional deterrent, have taken damage that the Pentagon has been notably reluctant to detail publicly. The alliance structure Washington spent decades building with Gulf partners is fraying, with several of those governments privately urging the U.S. not to reopen a war they know they'll be sitting next to when the missiles start flying again. The global economy has absorbed months of a partially closed Hormuz, and any analyst who tells you a fully closed strait for an extended period wouldn't risk tipping the world into recession is not being straight with you. And China, America's stated primary rival, the one everyone in Washington claims to be laser-focused on, has spent this entire war quietly benefiting from an America that is tied down, overextended, and burning credibility 8,000 kilometers from Beijing. Now, if you want the cleanest single piece of evidence for how this actually went, you don't need punditry. You need one document. The Memorandum of Understanding the United States signed with Iran on June 17th, in Versailles, of all places, during a G7 dinner. 14 points. And when you read through what it actually says rather than how it was announced, what you're looking at is not a peace deal between equals. It's closer to a settlement written by the side that ran out of options. The fighting stops. The strait reopens for 60 days, toll-free, an arrangement Iran made very clear from day one it did not consider permanent. Iran gets to sell oil on the open market again, without worrying about American sanctions enforcement. Frozen Iranian assets start moving back to Tehran. There's talk of a reconstruction package worth hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into a country the U.S. had just spent weeks bombing. And on the actual nuclear question, the entire justification for goal number 2, Iran keeps an enrichment capability, not eliminated, kept. If you drew up a scorecard of every disputed issue between Washington and Tehran going into that negotiation, the United States conceded on essentially all of them. That's not a ceasefire. That's a document written by the side that needed the war to end more than the other side did. So here's the part that actually explains why. Because the failure wasn't random, it followed directly from a set of strategic choices, and there were more options on the table than the ones that got used. Think of it as a menu with 5 items. 3 of them involve air power, 1 involves the Navy, 1 involves land forces, and the United States, for reasons we'll get into, only ever ordered off part of that menu. Option 1, a discriminate air campaign, precision strikes on military and leadership targets, largely avoiding civilian infrastructure, power grids, bridges, and critically, the oil and gas facilities that keep the Iranian economy breathing. Option 2, an indiscriminate air campaign, the same target list, plus everything the first version deliberately left alone. Option 3, tit for tat, small, contained exchanges, hit and counter-hit, kept below the threshold of full-scale war. Those are your 3 air options. Then there's the Navy's answer, a full maritime blockade of Iran. And finally, the option almost nobody in Washington wanted to say out loud, a ground invasion, land forces going after Iranian territory directly, whether that meant islands in the Persian Gulf or a push toward the mainland itself. Here's what actually happened. February 28th through April 8th, 40 days, as Basti Doast, NC6R, the U.S. and Israel run a discriminate air campaign. Shock and awe up front, aimed at decapitating the regime, and it works, at least on that narrow front. Senior leadership, including Khamenei himself, is killed in the opening strikes. But the campaign stays discriminate. Oil facilities, power stations, civilian bridges, mostly left alone. And then, right before the ceasefire, you get a preview of where Trump's head actually was. On April 7th, he said publicly that a whole civilization would die that night. 1 day later, ceasefire. That's the pattern to watch for with this administration, by the way. Escalate the rhetoric to its absolute ceiling, then pull back to a deal the moment the bluff gets called. It happened here in less than 24 hours. Then, negotiations. J.D. Vance flies to Islamabad on April 11th and 12th, trying to close it out. It goes nowhere. So, on April 13th, the U.S. pivots to option 4, the naval blockade. That runs from April 13th all the way to June 17th. 2 months of trying to strangle Iran's economy from the sea instead of the air. And the blockade fails too, in the sense that it doesn't produce a single one of the 4 original goals. It produces the Versailles Memorandum instead. Which brings us to where we actually are right now, because the memorandum was never the ending. It was just the next round. Within days of the ink drying, Iran hit a commercial vessel in the strait with a drone. Washington called it a ceasefire violation, launched contained retaliatory strikes, and just like that, the war downgraded into strategy number 3, tit for tat, the one option left on the menu after the first 2 burned out. Since then, it's been a rolling cycle, an attack on shipping, a limited American strike back, an Iranian response against a Gulf ally, repeat. Iran has openly signaled it intends to start charging transit fees once the 60-day free passage window expires, which the U.S. insists is unacceptable, and which Iran clearly does not care is unacceptable. Multiple commercial vessels have already been hit in and around Hormuz since the supposed ceasefire took hold. And that's the strategy the United States is currently running with. Not because it's expected to work, but because the other 4 options already failed, and nobody in the administration wants to be the one who says so on camera. Now, why does any of this matter specifically for the United States, beyond the obvious human and financial cost? Because this is where the story stops being about Iran and starts being about America's position in the world going forward. Every Gulf state that built its security architecture on the assumption that Washington was a reliable, controlled actor, just watch that assumption take real damage. You don't rebuild trust like that with a press release. Every country that's ever leaned on an American security guarantee is doing the same quiet math right now that Canada did earlier this year when it bought its next generation of fighter jets from Sweden instead of the United States, asking itself privately whether dependency on Washington is still the safe bet it used to be. That's not a hypothetical. That's a pattern showing up in procurement decisions, in travel advisories, in how allied governments hedge. And domestically, the politics are just as unresolved. There's real discomfort inside Trump's own coalition with a deal that critics see as letting Iran off easy, even while the administration insists it achieved something. Both of those things are apparently true at once, which tells you plenty about where this actually lands politically heading into the midterms. And here's the genuinely uncomfortable part, the one that doesn't get said enough. The strategy that's currently running, tit for tat, indefinitely, with no resolution on Hormuz and no resolution on enrichment, isn't a plan to win. It's a plan to avoid admitting there's no plan to win. Every option that could have produced the original 4 goals has already been tried and has already failed, and the 2 that weren't tried full indiscriminate bombing, or a ground invasion, carry the kind of costs in casualties and in global backlash that no White House actually wants to own, no matter how the base cheers online. So what's left is the appearance of ongoing action, dressed up as toughness, while the actual leverage keeps draining toward Tehran. Trump, characteristically, is not going to be the one to say the word defeat out loud, but you don't need him to say it. You just need to read the memorandum he signed and count the number of times Iran appears next to the word concedes. The United States entered this war with 4 goals and a 5-option playbook. It's now working through option 3 for a second time, having already burned through the first 2, with the 4th and 5th still sitting untouched on the shelf, because nobody's willing to pay what they'd cost. That's not a strategy anymore. That's a fighter's corner in the 9th round, still insisting the knockout is coming, right up until it very obviously isn't. I'm Marcus Fenn. This is Borderlines. Analysis from the edge. If today's breakdown was useful, there's a lot more coming, and this channel is only just getting started.